My family played Monopoly a lot. Almost every family gathering, me, my cousin, and uncle would get out one of the many Monopoly boards and start up a game with anyone else who would join in. While I was organizing the property tiles, my cousin would start passing out the money, and my uncle cleared out the plates for whatever meal we had just finished. In a matter of minutes, the dice would be rolling, and scarcely had the tile been landed on, then the next person would roll, and the next, and cash was handed every which way across that board as a property was bought, rent was paid, a beauty pageant won. And then after a few rounds around the board, the chaos would die down a bit as most of the property tiles had been snatched up, and now we all looked around to see who needed to barter for what. It was a fractured puzzle of properties, and only by making just the right trade could you hope to turn a couple of light blues and a red into a real estate empire. But in order to get what you want, someone else had to get what they want, and for them to get what they want, somebody else had to get what they want, and for them to get what they want, another person, everybody had to be taken care of. And in the eye of this storm, no matter who you were, if you had made a fortune or lost it, we were all hanging in the exciting, unknown possibility of what was about to happen next. And usually, what happened next was a flurry of trades, followed by a building boom, and then it was up to the dice to see whose investments would pay off and who would go bankrupt. And sure, while this could lead to a stalemate that stretched into 2, 3, 4 hours with just a couple of remaining players trapped at the table, most of these games went fast, so you would play again and again. Today there are more board games available than ever, but which ones should you check out? Join me for today's episode of Untangling Toys, where we're talking about board games. I'm standing on the world's largest permanent Monopoly board here in downtown San Jose. It's over 970 square feet, which, in case you didn't realize, is slightly larger than a standard Monopoly board. The game of Monopoly, or as it was originally known, the Landlord's Game, was created around 1903 by a game designer named Elizabeth Maggie. But board games have been a part of human culture for thousands of years. In fact, the oldest known board game, the Royal Game of dates back almost 4,600 years ago. And you can still get copies of it to play today. People are making recreations. Of course, the game of chess goes back thousands and thousands of years. These are actually recreations of a famous ancient set of chessmen known as the Lewis chessmen from the 12th century. They were carved out of walrus ivory somewhere in Scandinavia. It's really interesting to compare them to their modern-day counterparts. But there's been a huge boom in board games over the past few years. So if you thought board games were just things like Clue, Monopoly, Scrabble, well, I got a whole new world to show you. Welcome to the Guildhouse. This is a board game cafe. Well, really, it's every kind of game cafe, but it's also a board game cafe. This is a place where you can come with your friends and play all kinds of board games. And if you don't have any board games, you can borrow some from their extensive board game library. A place like this lets the community come together and play board games, and nobody has to worry about cleaning up their apartment or having enough seats around their table. One of the hardest things about having a board game get-together is finding a big enough table and having enough seats. And as you can see here, we have lots of tables and lots of seats. Board game cafes like this started to show up. Well, they really started to follow the boom in board games. It used to be if you wanted to find board games like this, you would have to find a specific niche game shop, board game shop, that was importing these things from Europe. Then came this game here, Klaus Teuber's Settlers of Catan, and this really became a global hit. And I mean, it was already a hit in Germany, but when it became a hit in the North American market, then people started really clamoring for all kinds of more European-style board games that were really outside that Milton Bradley Parker Brothers canon. And nowadays you can find games like Settlers of Catan or its variations or other really niche games. Even at local stores like Target have a really good game selection. But I mean, ideally, if you can support a local game shop, then you should shop there. But nowadays there are just so many different kinds of games out there. Every time you come to one of these places, you'll find new titles that you've never seen before. And anytime you have a board game night, somebody somebody shows up with a big duffel bag thing full of board games, You've never heard of them. Or somebody shows up with a duffel bag this size with one giant box inside of it, and it's all one game that has thousands of pieces and takes 2 hours just to set up. Where do you even get started in this vast new world of games? Today we are going to be talking with Andrew Santoro, a writer, director, board game fan, and he works at an indie board game company. So Andrew is going to sit down and explain how to play every single board game ever created. Clear the next 30 to 40 hours of your day, get a stack of notebooks ready, and let's learn how to play every single board game. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, Sam.
Thanks for coming on the show to talk about board games.
Good to be here. I'm here to talk about board games. I like those, and I work with those a lot.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about your job working for an indie board game company?
The fun thing about board game companies is they're like almost all indie, despite that article that came out about like $1 billion one recently. We are a company called Chip Theory Games. We make games with premium components and lots of rules. If you like reference sheets, you like our games. Our biggest product is Too Many Bones, where you play as little gearlocks, which are some combination of a goblin, a gremlin, and a person.
There's so many more board games out there now than your Monopolies and your Game of Life and your Risk.
We've come a long way since Monopoly.
What do you think caused such a boom in board games?
I think the pandemic really did something with it. People were at home and
I already told Andrew this, but I'm fighting a flu, so sorry if I cough or sound weird.
Yeah.
And I'm also, Andrew's screen is down here, and the camera screen is up there, so.
Yeah, and my camera is up here,
Yeah.
and Sam is over here, so I will look at you sometimes.
Yeah. And Andrew's in Minnesota.
That's true. That's where I live. That's where board games come from.
The Great Lakes.
There is a weirdly large amount of board game companies in Minnesota. It's half joke what I am saying.
Let's look at some board games. What do you got for us today?
So, upon your request, I have brought up a few categories of board games.
Yay.
But yeah, a typical party game is, Skippos, Yahtzees, like it's like these really little boxes that you can bring out. And my definitions on these are going to run together with other games, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But the ones I like a lot, I've got Fuji Flush, or as my version is called is Fujikato, which is the German name. So it's probably not said like I said it. But in this one, it is just cards with little numbers on them, cards with numerals. Yeah, just your 2s and your 7s. And the idea with this game is that the higher the number, the lower the odds that you have it. So there's a single 20 in the deck. There's a single 19. You would shuffle up the deck, deal them out to people, X amount to each player. And there's so many terms for games. This would be a shedding game, which sounds gross because you're trying to shed your hand.
Okay, yeah.
The reason I have the German version is the English version right now is out of print, and it costs about $30-some for this tiny box of cards. But when I was in Germany for Essen...
What's Essen?
Essen is the big board game festival in Germany.
Wow, that's cool.
Another thing is I pick up a lot of these party games because I go to a lot of conventions.
And Germany is kind of... I mean, I don't know if that's what started the big game boom, but there's literally a category called German-style board games. Like Catan is one of... probably the most well-known one.
Germans love their board games. There's a whole style of game called Euros. There's games called Ameritrash, which is just a bunch of dummies on a board, and you throw a bunch of dice and you kill a bunch of stuff.
Are some board games have a little satire to them? Because even Monopoly is famously a satire of capitalism or landlords.
Yes, it's intentionally meant to be not fun to play.
Yeah.
Funny thing about Monopoly too, and you might not know this, you know why there's so many versions of Monopoly?
I don't know. Sometimes you see a branded one, and it's like, how'd they get the rights?
First off, like Monopoly is not precious with the brand. Like they are more willing to open it up license-wise to have anyone have a monopoly. But if you see something like Minnesota-opoly, Minnesota did not like pay Hasbro or whoever, Milton Bradley? I don't remember who makes Monopoly. They did not pay for the license. But the thing is, Monopoly is only I looked this up for a game show that I was doing on our live streams, but it's very specific things are copyrighted about Monopoly.
Oh,
but as
okay.
far as like the opoly part,
Yeah.
so you can't call your game Monopoly.
Uh-huh.
You couldn't call it Minnesota Monopoly.
Right.
But if you just take the opoly,
Yeah.
you're good.
But then you also can't use like the picture of.
You can't take Uncle Pennybags' face, but you are good to take pretty much everything. Like the board shape is fine. The dice, the way they work is fine. Property names is not fine, but so much of it is just so open. And that's the thing with board games in general. It's hard to copyright anything because you can't copyright mechanics. So you'll come across a lot of board games that play the same. But yeah, Fuji Flush is a good one. There's another one called Doodle Dash. Doodle Dash is really good. There is a golden rod that you place in the center of the table and a 6-sided die. And the 6-sided die is blank on 5 sides and it has a little stop sign hand on one side. Everybody in the game is given a little dry erase board and there's a deck of cards. I think it's 2 cards per player. Each turn, someone will cover their eyes. Top card of the deck will be revealed and they will say a number between 1 and 7. As soon as they say start, everyone who is not covering their eyes, so the other players, will try to draw as fast as they can the word that is next to the number. Because as soon as you draw your doodle, you grab the golden rod in the middle of the table. The next person to complete theirs grabs the little die, and then they're furiously trying to roll the die to hit the stop signs that everyone else has to stop.
Oh, this is pretty fast paced for
It's
a round.
very fast paced.
Yeah.
So you want to draw the most just if you can represent your thing with a single line, you want to do it.
And that's an example of like taking some of the game mechanics of Pictionary and then adding this more high stakes quickness to the rounds.
It's like Pictionary with a real fire under it. It's really, really moving. It is a high stakes. It is so fun to sit around a table and have people. I had our prompt was Titanic, and I drew something I was so confident in. And I grabbed that golden stick, and then we went to reveal them, and I was like, I drew 2 triangles on this. Like, I drew a triangle as the ship, and I drew a triangle that it was heading towards. And I was so confident that the person was going to just vibe with that and know exactly what I was doing.
And this is something about just playing games. People who might be more reserved, when you all of a sudden put them in a situation where, quick, close your eyes and draw a grizzly bear. Something could come out of them when they start. It's like, oh, I didn't know you. Your competitive side, this other playful side of you is coming out.
Some people will think they've doodled like this dumb little thing, and it's just like, no, that is the thing. Like you have nailed the essence of a grizzly bear.
Can you tell us a little bit about what it takes to come up with the name for a game?
So, as a person who works at a company that makes a game called Too Many Bones that doesn't have a single walking around skeleton in it, the idea was just, some people call dice bones. Because throwing the bones is an old term, and too many bones. There's a lot of dice in the game. There's no bones in the game.
Sometimes you got to know somebody who's in the know, because you go to a store looking for a game and you find a game that says, Blood Gusher Apocalypse. Like, I don't want to play that, but it turns out, oh no, it's a joke.
There is this great game, and it's a good name, and I know it. I spoke with the designer, and I know its name was the name was the genesis, and then the design came out of the name, because the name is Cosmoctopus.
Cosmoctopus.
And it's you and a group of friends are all trying to be the first one to summon an eldritch octopus, which is represented by this little cute purple cartoon octopus on the box.
Okay, yeah.
And you're just trying to build an engine to get your summoning circle to summon this octopus the fastest. And it's just a delightful game with a delightful name.
When a game is being designed, does a lot of math go into charting out how things are weighted? Or do you just test that out through testing the game?
Yeah, you usually put most games through a lot of rounds of play testing to make sure that they are sitting in the place that you want them to be. We have a new solo game coming out that's like you just have a deck of cards and dice. We're doing playtesting on that now, and we ideally want our games to be hard, but we want them to sit in the doable range. So on regular or harder difficulties, I don't know the exact percentages that they uphold, but you don't want it to exceed 70%, and you certainly don't want it to be like way below 50%.
70%. What do those percentages mean?
Of like win-loss.
Oh,
so
okay.
like when play testers come back and they're like, I've been losing this amount. We don't want it to be like initially, one of the decks that we put through had 98 losses and 2 wins, and we're like, well, that's wrong. Someone's playing something wrong, or this needs to be tweaked because it should not do that. I mean, we as a company really stress over that a lot. We really want our games to be doable. I don't necessarily believe in the term like balanced, because I don't think a good fun game is necessarily balanced. Versus like controlled chaos. Like,
yeah,
you want the game to be fun and explosive for people while also not running away. Like there shouldn't be a clear right way to play any game. That's not fun. There's no discovery there. My ideal goal in most games that I work with at all is that you always just want to barely get through it, because then that's a story to tell. It's like, we just barely got through it. It was awesome.
That's what everybody remembers. I can't believe it was all over, and then you rolled a 12.
Those are the stories. Nobody's like, I came into the end and I had like 30 life. There's no way I could lose. Like I stomped it to death. Yeah,
that's some games I've played where it's like, oh, I think nobody can do anything to stop me from.
Yeah. And on the inverse, like, well, there's literally nothing I could. I'm looking at what I'm seeing, and there's no way I could do it. Like I've puzzled it out.
Pandemic is one of those games where it's built into it. You'll lose a good amount of the time.
So this is another thing too, is the like you're kind of meant to lose thing. There's an Arkham Horror card game. Arkham Horror is a board game that has a lot of rules, and it's really hard, and it's really hard to learn. They made what's called an LCG. LCGs are typically like your Pokemon or your Magic, but all of the cards are contained in one thing, and if you buy that thing, you get all the cards. Versus with your Magic or your Pokemon, you're like, I open a pack and hope to get what I hope to get.
Yeah.
But Arkham Horror's thing is that part of the first game you play in Arkham Horror is that you, I guess, are meant to lose. And that is the bit. It's supposed to be like, oh, it's so, you can't comprehend it. I did not come across this rule that I was supposed to lose. So me and my friend, we played Arkham Horror through to the end. We're like, that was really hard. I guess next time we play this, we'll just try it again. Not how you're supposed to. You're supposed to move on to the next thing. But we were just like, yeah, let's replay the tutorial because clearly it shouldn't be this hard. And I think that's wrong. You should not do that.
Can you explain quickly what a legacy game is? Because that's pretty cool.
You're at your local game store and you see a Pandemic next to a Pandemic Legacy or a Clank next to a Clank Legacy. The differences with those is your non-legacy version is just going to be the game that you know and love. Pandemic, you're going around trying to stop a disease. Clank, you are trying to steal some money from a dragon. The legacy versions are going to have a narrative that's going to go the whole thing, and it's also going to like be so unique to you as a player. So I'll give a quick rundown of Clank. Clank's a deck builder where you build a deck and you're trying to go underground and steal treasure from a dragon. All your cards sort of sometimes make noise, and the more noise you make, the more likely the dragon is to bite you. In Clank Legacy, you'll get prompts. Every time you touch like a certain space, it'll be like, oh, check this entry. And you go to this entry and it's like, this guy thinks you should try to get this sword from the dwarves. He knows you can rule the dwarves if you have the sword. So now you add the sword token to the board. And now if you go get this sword, you can bring it back to him, or you can just turn it in for victory points at the end of the game. We had a game in which someone grabbed the sword, did not give it to him. And then at the end of it, he said, I went and ruled those dwarves anyways. But now because you didn't give me that sword, I don't like you. And we had to add this guy to our bank of cards. We added a sticker to his card that gave him a special extra mean ability because he didn't like us. So now every time he pulls out of the bag or pulls out of the deck, he does something bad to all of us.
This turns a game you might play in one day into a thing you can play over weeks.
I know specifically with Clank Legacy, I believe it's meant to be played over 10 games. It's telling one consistent narrative over 10 games. And as you go along, you're adding stickers to your board, you're ripping up cards of things that have died. You're naming towns by sharpieing onto your board. And at the end of the thing, you have a board that's so custom to your party and will have so much inside and history with this group of players that you can then, I know at least with the Clank one, you can continue playing regular games of Clank on this new, very custom to you board with just your very custom set of Clank that nobody else will have in this exact way because you made your decisions. And there's so many nexus points that it feels very unlikely that someone would have the exact same board as you.
Is this starting to venture into the territory of tabletop role-playing games?
So there's a game called Gloomhaven that's a bit, it's called you would classify it as a dungeon crawler. That one does have a bit of the legacy components. You add stickers, you rip up cards, but it does play very D&D-ish without like a dungeon master, which is
probably one of the big appeals to it. It's hard work that they do, and it's hard to schedule
it's a lot of work. Yeah. It's such a big ask on one person to come up with like a full narrative for a table of people that might not show up. Like it's truly a thankless job. You should thank your DMs. They're very
that's right,
and your GMs. They're all very nice, good people. There's another like full game company that really works in this. They show up to all of the game conventions. I believe they're a small little Japanese company called Oink Games. Oink like a pig. All of their boxes for their games are like little guys. And all of their games are meant to be explainable and playable within like 20 to 30 minutes. They had one that I think is very clever that I played this last year called DroPoulter. It's a combination of the words drop and polter, as in poltergeist. And this one is like, a ghost has broken into your bedroom. You reach to your bedside quickly and grab the random charms that you have there. You know that these are going to be helpful in dispersing the ghost. And the gameplay is just, you have a handful of 5 or 6 random items that have distinctly different shapes. There's like a ring, there's a little cube, there's a little seashell, blah, blah, blah. You hold these in your hand and you can't look at them. You flip the top card of a deck and it will just have like a little ghost with like a cube. And then you have to be the first person to drop a cube out of your hand and then grab the ghost off the table. If you are the first person to drop a cube and only a cube, you get to add a little bell to your hand. The first person who gets 5 of those bells in their hands wins. If you drop your bell when you're trying to drop, you lose that point.
That's really interesting mechanics.
It's a really dumb, easy to explain game.
It's something very tactile.
Yes. Oh, immensely. And then you'll have one where it's just like, oh, the ghost wants every item in your hand except for one. So everyone's just like trying to grab that one and just dump their hand on the table as quick as possible.
So you brought up some games you can learn and play in about 30 minutes. And then we've also talked about some games that take 100 rounds. What about something that's sort of more on the, not quite that far, but more involved?
One game that's me and Kelsey, my lovely wife, we play is called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Agency.
Oh, I've seen that. They sell that at Target.
Yeah, it's just a box, and it comes with a bunch of little loose newspapers, a map of England or wherever, London, and then you get 10 cases in each of these boxes. There's, I believe, 4 of them now. You'll do them in chronological order, and you are taking on the role of not Sherlock Holmes. You're the Baker Street Boys or the whatever they're called, his little rapscallions who collect evidence for him. And the idea of the game is the quicker you solve the case, the more points you get. But you are trying to solve the case in a way that gets you more points than Sherlock Holmes. You're trying to beat Sherlock Holmes.
You're competing with Sherlock Holmes?
Yeah, you do not play as Sherlock Holmes. The idea of the game is just like you'll read this thing. It was like, oh, my tin soldier was stolen from my home. And then what you would do is you're like, okay, so this is what the case is telling me. And then you would consult your little newspaper. You would read your newspaper for the day that the crime happened. You'd be like, okay, well, it looks like there's a toy soldier sale that was made. Why was a toy soldier sale made? It's nothing that obvious, but you try to connect the links and you like look up, oh, this person's name was mentioned in this newspaper article. Let's visit their house. And you'll look through your like phone book and find their address, and you'll read the entry in your casebook to see what happens. You're like, oh, they were there and they were acting suspiciously. They said the Toy Soldier convention got canceled because they had to go to the hospital. The hospital. Maybe we should check on the hospital. You're trying to like do these things in the least amount of steps because Sherlock's going to solve it like, oh, I saw a cigarette butt on that guy's like shoe, and that led me to believe that his mother was the murderer. What's great about these, right, is at the end of your case, you will see how many steps and how Sherlock did it. And he always has like 100 points. And then you will subtract points based on like how many steps you took. But what comes up in these cases is sometimes when you're like trying to find the missing toy soldier, you cotton on to the fact that there's like, oh, there's a murder. Who did that murder? Let's figure it out. We're the Baker Street Boys. So you will try and solve this murder. And then at the end of each case, there will be like a quiz of like, did you solve who did this? Did you figure out who did this? And you get extra points for those because the thing is, Sherlock solves the missions quickly, but he doesn't care about collateral stuff. So like Sherlock might have noticed a murder, but that's not the case he was trying to solve.
He was paying me to solve that murder.
Yeah, so you will get a bunch of extra points for solving the murder, or like
Sherlock's a jerk.
Sherlock is a jerk.
There's so many games out there. Where would you recommend people go to look for new games?
Yeah, Target has really grown their collection out. Like Target's a huge one. I know Barnes and Noble is another really big one.
Oh yeah.
Just a lot of these bigger games that you used to have to go to a convention, or you would have to go to an LGS. Or
what's an LGS?
That's a local game store.
Okay.
Games by James is more specific to like board games. But yeah, your local game store will usually have a board game collection. They won't always. I know a lot of places are just trading card games.
Can you briefly talk a little bit about trading card games?
They're good.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, there's two distinctions because there's TCGs and CCGs. They're like the same thing, but they're more nebulous. Like trading card games are like more about the playing of the game, and collectible card games are more about the act of collecting them. Pokemon, I would call a collector's card game. It is largely driven by collectors, and it's mostly not played. Like there's definitely play happening, but it is mostly a game for collecting. I just started playing the One Piece card game, which I enjoy a lot. It's got all my favorite One Piece characters, and it has a lot of collecting aspects to it, which is cool. But the thing they do is they will often have a collector version, like a really cool art treatment of a card, but then they'll have like a version of that card that costs like a dime. So there'll be like a $200 version of this thing, or one that costs a penny. For someone who just does not care about the collecting aspect at all, or maybe you open a pack and, I open this $200 card, I can sell this, buy a bunch more packs, and I can just play with the cheap cards. Like
you get the collecting aspect and you get the gameplay aspect.
Yeah. Magic's the best. It's like the gold standard. I don't
the
think
original,
it's ever
right?
Yeah, I'm sure there was something before it, but it like the way it did all the things is so unique. The idea with all these games though is that they're highly variable. You should be able to build anything that you want. There's usually an archetype of play that you can find that you will like playing that will suit your style.
Thank you so much for telling us about all of these different board games.
Thanks for having me on the show. The game company I work for, we're Chip Theory Games. ChipTheoryGames.com. You can check out our YouTube. That's where I put out most of our videos. And a lot of our live streams.
Oh, well, that's a good thing we should mention. If you're playing games, there are so many video tutorials that'll walk you through what the rules are.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Watch It Played. Rodney over at Watch It Played is really good at tutorials, and he is the nicest man. He is just a treasure to back and forth with.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other people that are also super nice. I wish I could shout out all the people. Most of my job is talking back and forth with those people, the people who make board game content. So they're all so lovely and so nice.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. And gosh, I'm never good with ending these things.
You just gotta have a sign off.
And that's how the game board folds, and all the pieces go back in the box.
And that's how the components crumble. They shouldn't crumble. You should submit a support ticket to whatever company made that game. That game needs to be recalled. Your components are crumbling. Don't inhale them.
No.
Goodness, don't inhale them.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Well, thank you, Andrew, for telling us all about your love of games. What was your favorite new game that you learned about? Or what are your favorite board games? You can let us know by sending a comment or an email to untanglingtoys@gmail.com. That's also the best place to send questions or comments about toys and play or suggestions for future episodes. That's all for this episode of Untangling Toys, and see you next week. Bye.